So I got to tell you the story. A couple weeks ago, getting ready for the sermon for Palm Sunday, it was a normal sermon prep time, and I thought, gosh, we got to do something different. 2,000 years ago, this all happened. We all learned it in Sunday school. It's a story we hear over and over again. It's every Easter, the same kind of story. Do we realize how real it is? Do we realize that it actually really happened? There really was a person, Jesus Christ. He really did live. He really was born to Mary and Joseph. He really did perform miracles. He really was sometimes accepted by the crowds and other times not. He really did go to the cross for us. He really did die. He really was in a tomb, and 3 days later, they found that tomb empty. And then you make the visit, or you get the phone call, or you get the email like I got yesterday. And Jane Hermanis tells me that her mother, who's been with her, staying with her, Jane taking care of her, she's in hospice care, she's in the last days of her life. And Jane tells me, I woke up in the middle of the night and I went to her bedroom, and as I'm going to her bedroom, I can see she's not moving. And for sure, when I get there into the bedroom, she's passed away. So I give her a phone call. And in the phone call, she says, but you know what, Pastor? It is kind of neat to die right around Easter time and to spend that Easter with Jesus and to know that. And I'm thinking, why can we talk about that so confidently? Why can we be so much at peace with that? Are we just deluding ourselves? Have we just made all this stuff up? Did the church make it up? Did pastors make it up over time? Did historians make it up? Or is this really the truth so that we really can look at this and say, she's with the Lord? And we can walk out of the cemetery and look at all those gravestones and say, well, I know it says this date dash this date, but you know what? They're alive. Because I remember when we went out there to that cemetery and we said, where, O death, is your victory? Where, O death, is your sting? Right? We proclaimed the victory right out there at the cemetery. We believe that. And so I said, we need to help make this a little more real. So I found a video. Showed it first last Sunday on Palm Sunday. And it was kind of fun to watch all of you just kind of get connected with that video because it was kind of showing the bar on the bottom, kind of like Mitchell has right there up on the screen. And I ran it like halfway and then we stopped. And everybody kind of goes, oh, don't leave me hanging there. Because I brought it up to about Palm Sunday and I said, this is the story up to this point, but you know what? You got to come this week to see the rest of the story. Little Paul Harvey and me, sorry. Okay, and you all told me, said that story really rang true for me. So could we see the rest of it? So we watched a little more on Thursday, and we watched a little more on Good Friday, and you get to see the rest of it today. And the end of that story, well, really the beginning of that story. And here's the thing I want you to know, and I want you to remember, that what you and I believe by faith about Jesus Christ is certainly true. The Bible lists so many facts and details about the life of Jesus Christ. I told you that in the account of Luke. Luke gives us detail, the names of the actual women who saw him alive and who came there and saw that empty tomb. The Bible has facts after facts after facts about the life of Jesus Christ. And critics have tried to detract the Bible and take away from what it said and say, oh, it can't be true, but we still have the same Bible. And there are students who have studied the scriptures their whole lifetime. Dr. Meyer, the one that you'll see again on the video, and if you earlier saw him there, has his doctorate in theology. He has studied the scriptures, and not only the Bible, but also other historical accounts of that same time, and he knows that, and he's made that a part of his study, and he still comes up believing this is true in the Bible. And then there have been archaeological studies where we have dug up artifacts that verify the locations of nearly every single town mentioned in the Bible, even though it's under tons of rubble. And they meticulously dug it out. And each one of them verifies what the Bible has told us all along. And then as someone reminded me in a Facebook post, every once in a while, there's a good thing on Facebook, okay? Of how the 10 of the 11 remaining disciples died, crucified, beaten to death, whipped, dragged by animal till they died. These are people who would not deny that Jesus Christ rose from the dead. They were willing to die for that because they believed it to be true, and they wanted it passed along to you and me. Oh no, this is true. What you and I proclaim at Easter is the truth about Jesus Christ. And so, let's see how that story goes on.
Expected. The women visit the tomb and are shocked to find it empty. Even the sources most hostile to Christianity admit the tomb was empty.
There's no question about the fact that even on a historical basis, we can prove the empty tomb. That on Sunday morning, the tomb in which Jesus was buried was in fact empty. Now, of course, we've got to be very fair and say an empty tomb alone does not prove a resurrection. But put it this way, reverse it. You can't have a resurrection without the tomb being empty as its first symptom.
While all the gospel accounts agree the tomb was empty, the details of those first moments on Sunday vary in the biblical accounts.
What's interesting about the resurrection accounts is that we get four slightly different accounts. There's no question about it. Matthew, Mark, and Luke, the synoptics have 2, 3, or 4 women, whereas the Gospel of John has only 1 woman. But what does that prove? We know that people seeing the same event will report it differently. They simply do that. It shows the honesty of the early church editors. They didn't try to coalesce their story into one agreed upon, laundered, edited account. If that happened today, that's what would happen. They try to get it only in one agreed upon, universally agreed upon account. No, the early church was honest and simply reported those differences included, which now in the long run add credibility to the account rather than in any way demeaning it.
Also adding credibility to the gospel accounts is the depiction of Peter. He's described as confused, disloyal, and fearful, not the characteristics one would invent for a church leader. The biblical accounts are packed with this kind of embarrassing material. The only reason to preserve it is if it's true.
Now, that's very important because that brings in what historians call the criterion of embarrassment. It's one of the strongest proofs.
Early Sunday morning, Jesus rises from the dead, appearing first to the women, then to Peter, and then to disciples walking along the road. Later that day, Jesus visits his followers together, and he makes efforts to explain he's not a spirit or a vision. He is a person with a physical body.
When the disciples in the upper room on the evening of Easter were gathered together, and Jesus suddenly appeared among them, having somehow come through the walls or whatever, okay, that looks like a spirit. But Jesus anticipates that objection when he says, "Do you have anything to eat?" A week later, "Thomas, touch me, see my wounds." A spirit doesn't have flesh and bones and consumes food, does it?
Sunday morning marked the beginning of a 40-day period during which Jesus visits his followers on multiple occasions, culminating in his ascension into heaven. A few days later, at Pentecost, the number of followers begins to grow exponentially. Thousands upon thousands, believing that a man who said he was also God died and came back to life. As the movement grew, opponents of Christianity quickly took notice.
Surely, if these spectacular events really happened, then we ought to be able to find some fallout in the context of the ancient world, which would reflect that original explosion of Christianity. There's got to be some fallout out there. First of all, I would call to witness Cornelius Tacitus. He's a great Roman historian of the first century. Tacitus is not a Christian author. He kind of hates the Christians. He thinks there's so much sewage. Nevertheless, he concedes that there was a Jesus who was crucified by Pontius Pilate, who the Christians claim rose from the dead. That's exactly what the Bible says. I found that again and again and again. There are so many points of tangency between the secular and the sacred evidence.
The most detailed accounts are in the Gospels themselves. Luke, for example, offers remarkable detail.
He's very careful, writing for a Gentile, Greco-Roman audience, to make sure this stuff is always aligned with what's happening in the politics of the ancient Mediterranean world at that time. This is why Luke is constantly throwing an anchor out into the mainstream of Greco-Roman history. He also is interested in showing Theophilus and other Christians that these things were not done in a corner. There's not some special mythology going on here. This is nuts and bolts stuff involving real people acting in a real corner of the Mediterranean at a real time in history.
Real events that changed human history. The most important week ever. The week that changed the world.
He was one of them. He was with
And now you know where you can find more. The week that changed our world as well. And that's why we can talk to one another about the resurrection. And that's why the funeral that I had yesterday too, the talk is about heaven and life again and seeing one another again and all of that. And where does it come from? It comes from the fact of the life of Jesus Christ. The life that not only changed their world, but the life that changes your world as mine, as well as mine. The life that changes our worries, our fears, and our calling in life every single day. Called to be a witness of the one who has given us that light because of the very real story, the very real account of the life of Jesus Christ. And you heard him say at the very end, I send you out to be a witness of that light. Let's show that this is the week that changed our lives as well. Because he is risen. He is risen indeed. Hallelujah. Let's stand.